Time. It's the one commodity that we can never seem to get enough of. It's the one commodity that we can never refill, or that we can never replenish. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me give you an example. If you were to run out of gas in your vehicle, like today I'm sitting in my vehicle, you just simply go to the gas station and you refill it. If you run out of water in your water bottle, you just go and refill it. If you run out of money in your bank account, you just go and work more hours and you replenish your bank account from what you get paid. But time, once it's gone, it's gone. I want to share with you a story, and it's a story about Moses, but we're going to read Stephen's account from Acts. And it's found in Acts chapter 7 when Stephen is giving his speech to the Sanhedrin. And it says that at that time Moses was born, and he was no ordinary child. For 3 months he was cared for by his family. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him up as her own son. Moses was educated in all wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. Okay, it says here in verse 23, Moses, when he was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. He saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. This is the key, verse 25. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. Moses, in verse 25, already knew that he had a call on his life to rescue his own people, to bring them out of bondage, to bring them out of slavery to the Egyptians. He already knew this, okay? And he goes to this Egyptian who he sees mistreating one of his own, and he kills him. Obviously the wrong answer, obviously not the right way that God wanted you to be used. But in his own mind, he thought at that time it was good intention. He thought that he was trying to do his best to rescue this fellow Hebrew. Okay, let's keep reading. The next day, Moses came upon 2 Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile them by saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other?" Verse 27, but the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. So Moses gets confronted by this other man, and he says, "What are you going to do? You're going to kill me like you did the other guy?" And Moses flees. I want you to notice one thing. I'm going to back up a little bit here first, and I'm going to tell you this, okay? In verse 22, it says Moses was educated in all wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech. Okay, that key term, powerful in speech, that's going to play a key point here in a second as I continue to show you this. Okay, after 40 years, after hearing this word from this man, after 40 years, Moses goes and has this burning bush experience with God that we've all heard about, where God appears to him in a burning bush and calls him to go and rescue the people and bring them out of Egypt. After 40 years, remember what I said about time. Okay, time, you cannot replenish time. Time is very important. But after 40 years, Moses comes to this burning bush experience, and when God calls him, what's the first thing that he says? He says, "Well, I'm poor of speech. I have a problem with my speech. I have a speech impediment." And he tries to use that as an excuse not to follow the call of God on his life after 40 years, okay? But if we went back to verse 22, it says that he was at one time powerful in speech. What has God called you to that you've been putting off for so long? Because you're unsure, or because maybe somebody spoke something over your life that really impacted you? You need to brush that off. It's time to put that aside. It's time to listen to what God has said over you. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And as you do, you're going to see that you can step out into your calling. You're going to see that you can step out into the goodness of God and do the things that God has called you to do. It's time to brush that stuff off. Listen, Moses lost 40 years. Okay, granted, Old Testament people, you know what, they lived for hundreds of years, but you know what? We're not anymore. The average lifespan of a male in America is in the mid-70s. I mean, you cannot afford to lose 40 years. You can't afford to lose any time at all. You need to follow the calling of God that God has on your life now, or you will miss it. And secondly, we need to take time to look at the strength that God has put in our life, not the weakness. Moses called upon his speech impediment, called upon his speech issues almost as an excuse not to be used by God. But you know what? God knew what was in Moses. God placed that in Moses. And like I said back in verse 22, he was powerful in speech. He had the ability to lead the nation out of bondage, out of Egypt, and rescue the Israelites. So number one, let's not give up any more time. Let's follow the calling that God has placed on our life now and do it with boldness, and do it in the security of knowing that God has placed that call in your life. And if God has called you to do it, it cannot fail. However, you can miss it if you allow yourself to miss it. So don't lose any more time on the calling that God has called you to do. Do it with boldness and look for the strengths that God has placed in your life to complete that calling. Amen. God bless you, and I hope to see you again.